Thank you for joining us. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Marshall Zellinger. Welcome to Politics Unplugged. Ann and I had the rare opportunity to sit down with Governor John Hickenlooper in his office and talk with him about the issues facing Colorado. We covered a wide variety of topics.
And first on our list, the issues you will be voting on in November, starting with Amendment 69.
I just think that we've gone through so much turmoil trying to expand coverage and create an exchange, you know, all the different elements that we've gone through to try and make our state healthier, that to throw all that out and start over, it just would be too disruptive and too expensive. And that initial cost, you know, if everything pans out, that everything gets paid for. But there's so many unknowns, and I think we're seeing that even the best intended efforts around healthcare are very difficult to bring in. The cost for the last 30 years, and so it's not like this is the fault of Obamacare, but for the last 30 years, cost has been going up and up and up. I mean, double digits many years for your insurance. I mean, when I was in the restaurant business, I remember we had 7 straight years of our health insurance costs went up double digits. It's crazy, right? I mean, it really is just crazy. At some point, we've got to figure out how to rein this in, but I don't think Amendment 69 is the way to do it.
Let's talk about Amendment 70, the minimum wage issue. And you're in the restaurant business, so I know this has affected you directly, but what do you think about the concept of raising the minimum wage here?
I am very sympathetic to it just because, I mean, right now, when I've talked to a bunch of restaurant people around, not just in Denver, but in Loveland and Colorado Springs, you can't find a dishwasher for even $11, right? I mean, I think you start them at $11, but if you're going to keep a good dishwasher, you're paying them $11.50, $12. Well, that's where they're talking about getting in by 2020. So almost everyone in the restaurant business is already making a minimum wage. And I think there are a lot of places, you know, fast food restaurants, places like that, where they aren't. And it's not like we're exporting those products, so we would be at a competitive disadvantage. All those restaurants would have to compete with each other, and they'd all be subject to the same system. So I'm sympathetic. I was very disappointed that they didn't include, that they didn't allow the tip credit to grow. And most people don't know what the tip credit is, but you know, when the federal government first put in a minimum wage, they said if a tipped employee is getting, you know, if the minimum wage was $5, a tipped employee would only get $2.50 as their minimum wage. It would be half of what the minimum wage is, because most restaurants, or many restaurants, the tipped employees are the highest paid people, even more than the managers. Good bartenders, waiters, waitresses do very, very well. So they decided not to do that, so that tipped wage kind of goes away. And there also wasn't, you know, we worry about having one minimum wage for the whole state, especially for things like ranchers and farmers trying to get their harvest in, where they are exporting products, and they're on right now commodity prices are really at record lows. This would be a difficult time for them to have to raise, you know, the cost of bringing in their crops. So other states have done a geographic, you know, exemption for certain parts of the state that are especially, you know, agriculturally oriented or something.
So you
like
would
that.
favor that?
Yeah, I think that would have made me much, the tip credit, if they'd gotten just some sort of a compromise there, a geographic carve out. That being said, you know, my guess is I'm still kind of thinking through and processing it, but I remain very sympathetic. I mean, look at the cost of housing. Housing is going out of sight. Government doesn't have the resources to build enough affordable housing for all the people that are being priced out of the market. The only way I can think that we begin to resolve that is find ways to pay people more, at least closer to a living wage.
I'm curious about Amendment 72, the cigarette and tobacco taxes. I guess if you have 50.1% of the voters non-smokers, it would pass. Because I can't imagine the smokers saying, yeah, I'll pay more for cigarette tobacco taxes. But it's 3 times, I want to say? Is that
yeah, it's almost 3 times, I think. Again, that's one that I'm sympathetic to. I mean, it's a big jump, as you say. But when I was in the restaurant business and I had all these young employees, many of whom were smokers, many of whom were trying to quit. The 2 things that that made it hard for them to quit, one was when they take a break, they go out into the alley and somebody else was smoking and they'd bum a cigarette even though they'd quit. This would go on. I mean, these were our family, right? You're very tightly connected when you're in the restaurant business. And they would really want to quit, but they just couldn't. So that was why I supported years ago the clean workplace. In other words, no smoking at any workplace to help kids. But even more than that, the price allows people to quit and really compels them to quit smoking more than any other thing, more than education, more than showing them grisly photographs of your lungs after 30 years of smoking. It is the one thing that will save thousands of lives. And I looked at they showed me a picture, when they came in and showed me a picture of all of our employees at the restaurant. They said, if we don't get smoking out of all the workplace, one of your 106 employees will die in the next 30 years of lung cancer. We can all but guarantee it. Which one is the one you're willing to live without? And it's a terrible way to put something like that. Well, the numbers are even larger. In other words, we'll get more people to quit by raising the tax like this.
How are you feeling about the assisted suicide issue?
It's a tough one. So we've been studying on how it's worked in Oregon, and there don't seem to have been examples of people trying to, skullduggery, people trying to get an inheritance and, somehow in some macabre scenario trying to get rid of their father or their mother or something. And it's interesting it's relatively small numbers of people have used it, and a large number, I think it was close to 2/3 of the people that apply for the drugs to be able to take their own life, in the end decide not to do it, and that they want to fight their battle. Again, I'm inclined to support it. It's a difficult situation always when you're dealing with someone's life and death, and I believe that God's within all of us, and in that funny sense that at a certain point, if someone's in incredible pain or suffering or just can't take the circumstances of their life anymore, that libertarian in me thinks that they should have that right, and that God would support that.
We've got presidential primaries twice on the ballot, and we have a legislative committee talking about it throughout the summer and fall. What should happen with presidential primaries?
Well, I think presidential primaries make a lot of sense. They allow people that are busy to still participate. I think they allow, especially when you have an election year like this with a lot of activity and a lot of energy going into the primaries. I mean, it was a train wreck. I went to my caucus and it was just a disaster. And it's funny, we did a poll of the 158 people in the room, squeezed in this room, of how many people had already made up their mind. And out of 158 people, 154 had already made up their mind. Didn't want to hear anything. They knew exactly who they were going to vote for. So, I mean, what a huge amount of time and effort and frustration for not much value. Again, we can still caucus. There's no reason why we can't. Those who want to caucus can still go and debate the pros and cons. And I think in terms of the open primaries, of allowing non-affiliated voters, independents, to participate, they're paying taxes, right? And their taxes are paying for this primary, and now it's over a third of the... and we're disenfranchising their taxes. They're not allowed to participate in something that they're paying for.
Let's switch to fracking now. We know the two issues didn't make it onto the ballot, but it's still a huge issue here in our state. So what needs to be addressed with the fracking issue? What would you like to see accomplished?
Well, this is an ongoing journey, right? And we've been working on this since the first day I came into office, of how do you balance? I mean, technology and horizontal drilling has brought oil and gas activity much closer to places where we never thought it would be, much closer to communities or schools. Now, we've always had setbacks and minimum allowances. We increased that from 350 feet to 500 feet, but many people still feel anxiety about that. So we have worked with the oil and gas community and with the environmental community to try and say, all right, let's make sure there are no methane leaks. Let's make sure every single well is visited every year, multiple times in the year, to make sure there's no leakage. Let's look at the process of drilling. How can it be less noisy, less dusty, less disturbing, and quicker if it's going to be, let's say, even within 2,000 feet of a habitation or a community, let's say. So part of this is making sure that people have a voice in that discussion, and I think a lot of the stuff we've been talking about for the last year or two is allowing more elected local leaders to have a voice in that discussion. Now, I don't believe that means we can have them ban fracking, which essentially says you're not going to have any oil and gas exploration, because in essence, I mean, that's a protected right in our Constitution. Someone's mineral leases are their private property, and this isn't Russia or China. We don't just take away someone's private property for no reason. Now, if we want to do that, we can go through eminent domain, and say, all right, we think these mineral leases are too close to a residential area. We can go through an appraisal process in the local community, maybe the state's a partner, but we buy them out of that lease. And I think that makes all the sense in the world if we really want to make sure that in certain places we don't have oil and gas activity.
You hear his answer on fracking there. Some might say he's crafting his position on fracking to make him a possible Clinton cabinet nominee if she's president. You'll hear what he says about that after this.